The Hubert Davis roller coaster ride rolls along in Chapel Hill this year with 10 new players and a GM. No more excuses.
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? It's Monday, September 15th, 2025. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade. You're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks so much for joining us to get your Monday started the right way with your first listen or your first watch. Special shout out to all the everydayers out there and all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord and all our great insiders as well. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. Download it today, FanDuel. You guys, super interesting show today. This is actually a bonus episode on Locked On College Basketball today, which, if you're not aware, I'm one of the co-hosts of. My co-host Andy Patton and I are in the midst of our team previews right now, and today's episode is the Tar Heels. So I thought I'd drop it into our podcast feed for us as well. So we're just going to pick up right at the beginning of that episode. It'll run through, and I'll jump in and just put an outro on the end of it as well. Just thought you would enjoy hearing kind of the national view of the Tar Heels. By the way, if you enjoy college basketball in its entirety, come check out our show. I love it, man. It's every day. Maybe you get tired of hearing me, but if you don't, man, I love college basketball so much. I hope you know that, and would love to have you on there. So here it is. Myself and Andy Patton, the co-hosts of Locked On College Basketball with the 25-26 Carolina preview.
Today, number 14, we're talking about Hubert Davis and the North Carolina Tar Heels. We're talking about how this team has done, as we mentioned in the cold open, the kind of roller coaster that we've seen for North Carolina the last half decade or so. Also talking about this roster, 9 newcomers, how all the pieces are going to fit together in Chapel Hill. We'll close out the show with some predictions for this team, how we think they're going to do in the ACC, where they might get seeded in the NCAA tournament, all that good stuff. Isaac, why don't you start us off by talking about what happened with this team last year?
Andy, last year was the year of getting down really big in the first half for the Tar Heels and nearly coming back only to fall short, including their season-ending loss to Ole Miss in the first round of the NCAA tournament. They finished 23-14. They were 13-7 overall. Many will remember they missed out in a big way, quite literally, on landing a big in the transfer portal. That really hurt them all season. They didn't have enough size in the front or backcourt, and that just made things tough. Roster construction wasn't what it needed to be. They tied with Wake Forest and SMU for 4th in the ACC behind Duke, Louisville, and Clemson. They were the 5th seed after the tiebreaker. They made it to the ACC semifinal where they lost to Duke for the 3rd time that season, thanks to, at least in part, to a Jalen Withers free throw lane violation, which probably the single thing that people most remember about the Tar Heels last year. They were 11 seed in the NCAA tournament, quite controversially, as many will remember, because AD Bubba Cunningham was the chair of the selection committee. They trounced San Diego State in the play-in game, only to fall to Ole Miss in that first round then. And then ultimately, Andy, RJ Davis, 2nd leading scorer in Carolina history behind only Tyler Hansbrough, is gone. They no longer rely on him. And so it's a whole new look as they roll the roller coaster into year 5 of the Hubert Davis era. And Andy, what a roller coaster it's been in the first 4 years.
It's been unbelievable how kind of like predictably unpredictable this North Carolina team has been since Hubert Davis took over. I mean, for folks who want to recap, 21-22, that season, they were on the bubble kind of most of the year. And then they beat Coach K in his final home game. They get that 9 seed. They beat Baylor. They beat Duke in the Final Four, which was just an unbelievably epic game. And then they were up 15 in the national championship game as a 9 seed that, again, was on a bubble for most of the year. The next year, they returned basically everybody, and they kind of started that trend that we've now been talking about a lot on the show, Isaac, about maybe not wanting to overvalue teams that have a lot of roster continuity when the team maybe wasn't actually all that good the previous year, because North Carolina returned everybody and everyone thought, okay, they're the preseason number 1. They're going to potentially win a championship. Not only did that not happen, they didn't even make the NCAA tournament, despite being the preseason number one. It was a stunning fall for North Carolina. The next year, they have a mass exodus in the transfer portal, not a surprise. A lot of transfers coming in, and then they earn themselves a number one seed with a very new look roster. Even though they fell in the Sweet 16, still a really great turnaround. Then last year, as you mentioned, the year of them getting up down big and then fighting their way back to only still barely lose those games. They did it all year on this really big gauntlet of a non-conference schedule. They struggled in a weak ACC, barely make it into the tournament, all that stuff that you laid out. And now we're kind of heading into an offseason that looks sort of similar to a couple of years ago, with a bunch of players departing, some of them via the transfer portal, some of them just out of eligibility. One of them in Drake Powell going to the NBA, somewhat surprisingly. And then you have a bunch of new players coming in. And so it's like, are we going to continue this trend? Are we going to have this team kind of do what they did a few years ago, where they have a very new look roster, things come together well, and they earn a really strong seed, in that case, a one seed, going into the tournament? Like, it's just, it feels like history is continuing to repeat itself here in the Hubert Davis era.
And as you said in the cold open, Andy, not only do they have in 3 freshmen, including, one of the top freshmen in the country, seemingly some good pieces in the portal, and what a lot of people think is going to be a really good international player in Luka Bogavac. They've also got in a general manager now. Right. And so, Andy, every hot seat list that I've seen so far this offseason has included Hubert Davis. Who knows what's actually true behind the scenes in Chapel Hill and with AD Bubba Cunningham. But as you said, I mean, the excuses are kind of up, because I think the North Carolina fan base and athletic department is not going to sit idly by while the predictable unpredictability that you said carries on. And so that is certainly going to be a thing. So they're going to have to get things figured out this year, or we could have some very interesting conversations as we get to March and April.
Yeah, and I think I do look at the roster construction, which we'll get more into the details on that a little bit later, but it certainly looks more positive. But I do think a concern, or at least something we're keeping an eye on coming into the season, is not only do you lose RJ Davis's productivity, which, again, the second most prolific scorer in the history of one of the most prolific programs in college basketball, but he was a senior, he was a veteran leader, and now you kind of are lacking that. And I think when you look at rosters that have a lot of turnover, it's so valuable to have kind of some of those familiar faces, those 2, 3, 4-year guys in the system who can kind of right the ship and direct the new players into how to be a North Carolina Tar Heel. And while RJ Davis being gone makes that more of a concern, I think it puts a little bit more pressure on Seth Trimble, because I think that's the role that you really want to see him take on, a guy who's been in the system for a couple of years, who's going to have the ball in his hands a lot, not necessarily the same as RJ Davis as a scorer, but he's a very, very good player alongside Kyan Evans. I think that backcourt is going to be very strong, but again, Trimble needs to be that guy, whether it's a vocal leader, an emotional leader, lead by example, some combination of those things. I'm sure you are, more plugged into his personality, but that's critical in my mind for this team to be able to have that kind of success. Because otherwise, even if the roster construction is better on paper, things fall apart pretty quickly if there's not somebody to kind of right the ship.
And Andy, as you said, all the reports that I've heard out of Chapel Hill this summer, including people, some sources that have been there, like at the summer camps and at a practice a couple weeks ago, the new owner of the Ben and Jerry's there on Franklin Street in Chapel Hill is in fact a vocal leader and has taken that mantle on. The difference is that was not RJ Davis. RJ Davis was the lead by example kind of guy that didn't really want to lead vocally, or this is not how his makeup came together. A lot of the reports are that Seth Trimble not only is capable of that, but is inviting it, getting everyone together. He was part of all the recruiting visits over the summer with portal guys. And so I think that could be a big deal, because you mentioned 2 years ago when Carolina was a 1 seed, part of why that worked so well is because Harrison Ingram and Cormac Ryan were both such vocal leaders that were going to hold everyone accountable and stand up for their teammates on the floor. And so with Seth Trimble doing that, and it sounds like there are several other vocal people as well, the experience of Luka Bogavac coming in, who has played professionally 4 years in Europe. And it seems, again, on paper and with what we've seen, that lack of leadership and communication on the floor that hurt Carolina this year should be out of the way this year. Another part of that is that Caleb Wilson apparently is a talker as well. Been talking about putting a bedazzled belt to Duke and NC State and Wake Forest. Apparently talks a lot of crap in practice.
Mhm.
And so I think we will hear more of that from the Tar Heels.
Yeah, I would think so too. I mean, with Wilson being that kind of player, with Bogavac having that experience, you have somebody like Jonathan Powell, who's got a lot of dog in him from what we've seen. Jaron Stevenson coming in as well. Like the makeup, at least personality wise, seems like it's going to fit very well. It's just a matter of how everything works on the floor, roles, things like that, things of that nature that I think we still need to see kind of how all that's going to come together. But it certainly feels like, it feels like your GM is doing his job if you're getting a roster that's going to have the right blend of personality and leadership traits and kind of everybody knowing their role and fitting it in. That's what you want out of a general manager at this level. And so I'm very excited to see how it all comes together, because like we've said kind of throughout the show, this feels like a time where if it doesn't come together, that seat's going to be boiling hot for Hubert Davis. And this roster has all the makings of a team that should be very, very good this year. So we'll see if they're able to put it together.
And that's the key, Andy. And frankly, all teams all across the nation have to figure that out in the portal era. A lot of it is how much time do you have in your schedule to do that? We will look at that obviously in the third segment. But Andy, all these new faces joining Hubert Davis in Chapel Hill, we're wondering how it's all going to fit together. Did Carolina get bigger because they were so short last year? How will all the pieces fit? What roles will they be in? Starting five predictions. Andy and I'll have all that and more coming up for you in just a second. Right after I tell you about this good-looking hat on my head, the game cap. Quick question for all you college football fans out there. If you could go back in time and sit front row at your school's biggest rivalry game, what hat would you be wearing? Yes, I said hat. For me, it's got to be the game. They aren't just hats. They're the game, the same vintage style hats that fans wore back in the 80s and 90s, like when I was growing up. And guess what? Here's what's cool about these hats, man. They still go for the exact same price they did back then. When you use code Locked On, you're going to get your vintage hat for just $16.99. Head on over to thegamecaps.com. Again, that's thegamecaps.com. You can find one like this Carolina blue one I'm wearing, a white one with Carolina blue font. Here's another one for those of you watching. You got that like retro circle look with the cursive font, man, all sorts of good stuff. I think this is the one of the three that works best with all my curls on top of my head. So go do it. Grab your team's classic bar or retro circle design. Use code Locked On for an exclusive discount, because legends, man, they wear the game. All caffeine just got a bold flavor upgrade. 5-hour energy shots deliver tasty caffeine in now 17 bold flavors. Each 2-ounce shot packs the caffeine of a premium 12-ounce cup of coffee, plus B vitamins and nutrients with zero sugar and zero crashes. I love that. I also really love how portable they are. Big taste, tiny shot. You can take it anywhere and get that boost whenever you need it. Andy, I was looking around on the website over the weekend, and I've been eyeing this purple berry punch flavor. I'm very intrigued by it. It's out right now. It's like a limited time flavor. Sounds like the perfect one to check out next. Honestly, I really love how fast 5-hour energy kicks in. And again, that it's sugar-free, so I don't have to worry about that crash coming later on. All right. Enough with flavorless, boring caffeine. It's time to give your caffeine a flavor upgrade with 5-hour energy shots. Get the favorites you love, or be bold and try something new in store or online at www.5hourenergy.com or on Amazon. Check it all out today. Andy, let's talk personnel for the Tar Heels. As you mentioned, Seth Trimble, literally the only player from the rotation last year that is back. James Brown, the only other player that was on the team last year. He's a sophomore, very limited playing time. Zayden High also returns, but he was not on the team last year. So 9 newcomers, 5 from the portal, 3 freshmen, and 1 international player. But Andy, I think before we even mention names, here's the thing we got to talk about. We said multiple times in the first segment how small North Carolina was last year and how unable to land that big time front court player that they needed. Have they fixed that? Have they gotten bigger? That's the question.
Yeah, absolutely they have. I mean, I think for this team, that was such a critical issue. They had the 3 guard lineups that I think all those guys were 6'3" or shorter. Like it was just, and it impacted them so much, even with the talent. Like it's not that those guys were bad, but you're just so limited when your backcourt doesn't have that much size. And there's a couple of teams that really struggled with this. North Carolina was very notable. The team that I follow very closely, Gonzaga, also had a small backcourt, and it was a problem. And it becomes a challenge when you're trying to, get out on shooters and be able to do what you need to do, particularly defensively. And so for North Carolina, they went out and addressed this. Last year, they had just 2 guys who were 6'10" or taller. This year, they have 6. I mean, that's a huge difference. They go out and get somebody like Jaron Stevenson, who's 6'11". I mean, a huge kind of wing 3-4 hybrid player. Like Henri Veesaar is obviously the notable example because he is big and he is a center and he comes over from Arizona. But like they've got bigger at multiple positions. Jonathan Powell from West Virginia, another transfer they brought in, is a big wing. I mean, he's 6'6", so he's not huge, but he brings more size on the perimeter than Carolina has had the last couple of years. So to me, like there was a very intentional decision by this staff. I mean, they knew they needed front court players regardless, but they went out and got bigger players at other positions as well. And that was clearly by design to kind of mitigate some of the concerns they had last year.
And Andy, we've been saying 9 players from a very technical standpoint. I guess we should say it's 10 because late in the summer they added Ivan Matlakovich coming over from High Point, but he's not going to really factor in and anyone thinks so. That I guess that's something we should mention is 9 players that we expect to have some kind of role in the rotation. And Andy, with this. One of the big things is a lot of people think Luka Bogavac, who's coming over, could potentially be North Carolina's leading scorer because he can kind of be a point wing, I guess we'd call it, a big playmaker. He's deadly from beyond the arc, deadly from the free throw line, can handle, can run, can finish at the rim. But the big thing is he didn't get to North Carolina till late in the summer. Still at this point, we have no word on NCAA clearance. If you're Hubert Davis in this staff, how would you be approaching that and going about it? Do you have to assume for both eventualities? How would you handle that?
Well, it's interesting that he's with the team, right? Like he's with the team and working out with them and practicing with them and all that, correct? Right. Like that is odd to me because and obviously I know the situations are different, but I will continue to bring it back to Gonzaga because there are a lot of similarities, and Gonzaga is waiting on a waiver for Tyon Grant-Foster, who was their big, wing addition this offseason. But Gonzaga, Tyon Grant-Foster cannot be around the team. Like legally, he's not allowed to until the NCAA gives him clearance. So the team is operating without him at this point, which I think it's not a good thing, obviously, but in the sense that if he does not get his waiver, at least they will kind of already know those roles. For Carolina, if Bogavac doesn't end up getting cleared and they have been working with him in a role and kind of getting used to what he's going to bring to the team, that does put a little bit more pressure on, okay, who's your backup? Who's the person who's going to fill that role? And so I think for Coach Davis and the staff, they have to be planning for that while kind of also assuming that they are going to have him. It's a bit of a tricky situation. I think for this team, I mean, you would expect Jonathan Powell to take on a bigger role. If Bogavac is unable to go, you would expect Jaron Stevenson to take on a bigger role. Whether those guys are kind of preparing to play the same role that Bogavac is already playing, I think is kind of up to the coaching staff and how confident they are in this situation going their way. But it's tricky. And I think, again, we could expand this into a much longer conversation of like, why on earth are there multiple high-profile programs who don't know statuses of some of their key players in mid-September? Like that feels insane that that's happening. And again, it's not even just those 2 programs. There's many others that are having these issues as well. And obviously the influx of international talent is part of it. But I feel for programs that are kind of struggling with this right now because you need to prepare for both situations. And it's pretty difficult to be able to do that, whether or not that player is kind of with your team or not.
A lot of limbo, Andy. Well, obviously you mentioned Drake Powell out, several guys out of eligibility, but also it was another mass exodus. Van Allen Lubin going to NC State. That's going to be intriguing. Part of the new ACC setup is that those 2 teams will only play once for the first time in forever. We'll talk about that in the next segment. Ian Jackson out the door to St. John's. A lot of people thought he might not honor his Carolina commitment initially and go up there with Rick Pitino. Elliot Cadeau transfers out to Michigan, Jalen Washington to Vanderbilt, and Cade Tyson to Minnesota. And so, Andy, as we hear some of those names, I think it brings to mind all the necessity of, hey, we're going to, like, you really got to see if this staff is learning better about how to evaluate talent in the portal, which is notably a tough thing to do. Andy, all of this said, Where are you going with your starting five for these 25-26 Tar Heels?
Yeah, very new look team. I got one returning starter. Obviously, that's Seth Trimble. It's not not really up for debate that he's going to start, and not really up for debate that he's going to be the only returner who starts for this team. I think the next very obvious spots for this team are Kion Evans, the Colorado State transfer. I think he's going to start at the 1. That feels, I mean, that's why they went out and got him, a tremendously talented player. Same with Henri Veesaar. He's going to start at the 5, a gifted post player coming over from Arizona. They've had a lot of success with their bigs over there. So, and then Caleb Wilson, again, a 5-star freshman, one of the best, kind of in that second tier of freshmen behind the big 3. And then you have Nate Ament and Mikael Brown, and Caleb Wilson's kind of right in that conversation. Could be one of the more productive freshmen in all of college basketball this upcoming season. And then that last spot, I think, is kind of, it depends on the Bogavac situation. By all accounts, if Bogavac is cleared and able to go, he is, again, 22 years old, multiple years of professional experience. He could slot right in at the 3 very seamlessly for this team. If he's not able to go, I think that spot goes to Jonathan Powell, a guy who, played very well as a freshman last year at West Virginia, started most of the games that he played, good 3-point shooter, good defender. You could start Stevenson's there, but then you're really big, which again would curb the issues the team had last year. But I think Stevenson might be better served coming off the bench in a more versatile role. But that's kind of where I'm at with this starting lineup right now.
Yeah, and that makes sense with Stevenson, because part of it is with Vin Allen Lubin leaving to NC State instead of backing up Veesaar, Stevenson might end up having to play some backup 5, and so we'll see what that looks like. They have talked about that they've seen some of that jumbo package with the 3 of them. I think that makes sense at certain times to utilize that. Andy, I'm with you. I think if Bogavac is cleared, he's the starting 3. When we first at the beginning of the postseason, I didn't think it would work to have Seth Trimble start, because he's not a prolific 3-point shooter. He's had some high percentages. He had a head injury last year, didn't shoot well after that, but he's also not high volume. And so his sophomore year, he had a good percentage, low volume. The first part of last year, good percentage, low volume. And so it was like, man, if Elliot Cadeau is still the 1, it doesn't work. But because of the shooting of Kion Evans, of Luka Bogavac, of Caleb Wilson, and Henri Veesaar, I think that spacing, and Henri Veesaar actually talked about this last week, really opens things up for Seth Trimble's athleticism to be on full display. So I think that all works and makes sense with then Jonathan Powell, Jarin Stevenson. And it sounds like Derek Dixon is at this point kind of got the edge on that 8th spot in the rotation.
Yeah, that all makes a ton of sense to me. And I think for me, looking at breakout candidates for this team, like who are the guys that I think need to step up for this team to really kind of reach that threshold? I've talked about him a few times already, but I'm really intrigued by Jonathan Powell and what he can bring to this team. I think the best version of North Carolina has Jonathan Powell coming off the bench, because it means that Luka Bogavac is contributing at the rate that fans want him to contribute. And in that case, Powell is somebody who can play the 2, he can play the 3. He's a good 3-point shooter. Like percentage wise, it was 35.5%. So it's not elite, but that was on close to 6 attempts per game. Like this dude was a high volume shooter, and in a role where, he's maybe coming off the bench, or when he's on the floor, he's more like the 3rd option, maybe even the 4th option. I think you're looking at a player who's going to get more open looks than he was getting at West Virginia, where he was more like the 2nd option at times, especially with some of the injuries that team dealt with. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see Jonathan Powell shoot close to 40% on like 3 attempts per game, which if you're Carolina, you take that happily, like, especially if he's coming off the bench playing 18 minutes a game or whatever like that. I think that's, that doesn't scream like breakout. His numbers probably won't look that much different than they did at West Virginia, but that's a critical piece for North Carolina. And if he's that guy, if he's delivering what they need him to do, a 3-and-D wing off the bench, versatility at multiple spots, I think that's a huge win for this team in the transfer portal, and the kind of floor raiser that this team really needs.
And we'll see if any of these other kind of bench players on the team can contribute in any way. Like if any of them happen to pop, whether it's another freshman in Isaiah Dennis, Zayden High coming back to the team. Again, we don't think Ivan Matlakovich coming over from High Point is going to contribute really much of anything, but it's a nice another 7-footer to go up against Veesaar in practice, Andy. So we'll see how it all comes together.
Well, Isaac, now it's time for us to give our predictions, because we're talking about a team here that can they realistically challenge for a top 2 or 3 spot in the ACC? You got Duke, you got Louisville, you got some other teams that are looking really good this year. And what does this potentially mean for this team's seeding in March and potential to make a Sweet 16 run, Elite 8 run, maybe even farther than that? We're going to give you our thoughts on all of that coming up here in just a second. But first, folks, PrizePicks is the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every single day, but on PrizePicks, being right means cashing in. With football back, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. I've been playing PrizePicks for a couple of years now, and it's such a fun way to stay locked in on the season. It's quick, it's easy, and honestly, it's my favorite way to follow along with football. Monday Night Football coming up tonight. Quarterback for the Tampa Bay, Baker Mayfield, over under 1.5 passing touchdowns at Houston. I think he's going to be over that mark. That's what I'm hitting for tonight. And the best part, even if one of your picks misses, PrizePicks invented the flex play, so you can still double your money. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks. It's good to be right.
This episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Y'all, the NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you're going to get $300 in bonus bets to use all across the app. One of the great things about FanDuel is that it fits however you like to play. Player props, betting a same-game parlay, even jumping in live as the action unfolds. I love the real-time energy of that. It makes every game more exciting, so whether you're watching your team, maybe you're just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup, it's a great way to do it. It's quick, it's easy, and the best way to add a little more spice and energy to your Sundays. We're talking about the Tar Heels right now. They are plus 4,000 to bring a title to Chapel Hill in 2026. Maybe you think that's some good odds and this is going to come together. That'd be a great one to get in on. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. Once again, that's FanDuel.com. Andy, let's get to the non-conference portion of the schedule. Earlier, you mentioned what a gauntlet they had last year, and it was pretty insane. And I think Hubert Davis and staff have wisely this year ratcheted down the difficulty scale. The ACC has dropped to 18 conference games. That means there are 13 non-con games, Andy. And really, there were only 5 or 6 highlights. The rest are home bye games. Carolina has 1 true road game. They also play on the road an exhibition game, not at BYU, but in Salt Lake City at the Jazz Arena there. That'll be Friday, October 24th. But then the high major games to pay attention to, or the games of note, I guess I should say. Friday, November 7th, first Friday of the season, hosting Kansas, the back end of a head-to-head. The Jayhawks won in Lawrence last year. All the way to Thanksgiving week, Tuesday, they will play St. Bonaventure. We just talked to A10 last Friday, our A10 preview. That's in the Fort Myers tip-off. Day off on Wednesday. Then Thanksgiving Day, they'll play Michigan State in the Fort Myers tip-off. It's like a preordained set of games. The next Tuesday, December 2nd, at Rupp Arena, Carolina at Kentucky, ACC SEC Challenge. That should be a lot of fun. That coming Sunday, December 7th, Carolina hosting Georgetown on the front end of a home and home up in DC next year. And then the other big game of note, one of those December Saturdays, Andy, Saturday, December 20th against Ohio State down in Atlanta for the CBS Sports Classic. What do you make of this? Is this wise to scale back like this, or is it too mamby-pamby? Where are you at on it?
Yeah, I think it was a smart scale back. I do think that it puts a little bit more pressure on them to not lose games. Obviously, there's always that pressure, but also like it feels like there's a bit of a gamble here that the ACC is going to be stronger than it was last year. A gamble, by the way, that I agree with. I think you look at the ACC, that we've talked about it a few times this offseason, but coaching changes at NC State, coaching changes at Miami, coaching changes at Virginia and Florida State should make those 4 teams all better. I believe all 4 of those teams will be better, and in some cases, significantly better. Duke and Louisville are going to continue to be great. So then it's a question of like, do Stanford and Cal improve now that they're more used to the travel, or SMU for that matter, a team that a lot of people are fairly high on? Virginia Tech's got some talent in. Can they kind of turn it around? I'm not saying that those teams are going to balloon all the way up to being top 5 in the conference, but if they're adequate, at least, like, that is going to help a lot for a team like North Carolina. And I think that being willing to scale back on the non-conference schedule is hopefully a belief that North Carolina has that, hey, our conference schedule is maybe not going to be as much of a challenge for us. I love a road game or a pseudo road game against BYU in the exhibition series, because I think that you want to blend challenging your team with not putting yourself in a position where you're heading into conference play needing to win 80% of your games in order to make the tournament. And that's what happened last year. So a game like this where you might go all the way to Salt Lake City, and there's a possibility that Carolina gets it handed to them. Like that could distinctly happen in this game, but it doesn't count. It doesn't matter. And if you go out there and you win that game, then you build a whole bunch of confidence going into the regular season. So I love that game. I think that's fantastic. I think that's smart. And I think that even some of their less, they're not power conference games. That St. Bonaventure's a good team. I think Navy will be a fun matchup. Like I think they have some decent games here that should help this team without taxing them too much. I think it's a solid blend for this program at this time and kind of where they're at right now.
And when you bring in, as we've been talking about 9 or 10 players with Matt Lakovich, as we said, that gives you a lot of space. I mean, because outside of Kansas, Andy, they don't play anybody of note till Thursday, November 27th.
Right.
And that's Michigan. And with all due respect to St. Bonaventure, right? But I mean, so that's a nice thing there. And so it gives them a lot of space. Andy, that ACC schedule, interestingly, Carolina has to go to all 3 of the newcomers. They're at SMU on Saturday, January 3rd, and then Stanford and Cal on January 13th and 17th. But you get all that out of the way by January 17th. 3 of the first 5 are on the road, 5 of the last 8. And Andy, that means 8 of North Carolina's final 10 games are all in the state of North Carolina, 6 of which are at home. So that's a very intriguing schedule. Andy, all of that put together, where do you think these Tar Heels land in the conference standings?
I do think the combination of, a solid non-conference that's not overly difficult, and I think a conference schedule that works really well to their advantage. Like you mentioned, having to go to Stanford, Cal, and SMU is not easy in the sense that it's a huge road trip, multiple time zones, all that stuff that we know. But none of those teams, I mean, SMU, I think will be decent. Stanford might be okay, but Carolina should win those games. And then, like you said, the finisher where they're pretty much not going anywhere for those final games. Obviously, at Duke will be tough. At NC State will be tough. But they're staying around home. So I have this team. I think 3rd or 4th is kind of where I have them. I think they could absolutely finish 2nd. I think that's possible. It would require probably Louisville to not be quite as good as we think they're going to be. I think 3rd is more likely, with 4th being kind of depending on how good Will Wade is in year 1. I think Miami and Virginia are going to be good as well, but I have them more like 5, 6, 6, 7 in that range. So I'll say 3rd or 4th for Carolina. I think anything lower than 4th would be pretty disappointing, even if it's because like Ryan Odom is absolutely awesome in year 1. Like I think that could happen, but for Carolina, I think they need to finish at worst 4th for it to not feel like Hubert Davis is in real trouble.
Yeah, I mean, you always, I guess in this day and age, we got a hedge that some rando team is going to pop, but it feels like Duke, Louisville, and Carolina probably have the best talent in the conference, and it's about bringing it together. Interestingly, Louisville also plays Duke twice and only plays Carolina in Chapel Hill, so that could be a factor in all that as well. So, Andy, I'm with you. I think 2 to 4, or really 2 to 3. Like I feel like 4th, you're kind of like, hey, I don't know. So, like, as we look at projections of record, Andy, because of the non-con relative ease, I'm going to go 11-2 with it. With the game at Kentucky, I'm going to call a loss, and then either Michigan State or Kansas, I'm going to go 13-5 in the conference record. Again, we joked about it earlier, but it's wild that in this new ACC format, North Carolina and NC State are only playing once. That's kind of a bummer with the juice that Will Wade is bringing to that rivalry. And so anyway, Andy, I'm going to settle on a 24-7 regular season record for the Tar Heels. What about you?
Yeah, very similar. And folks, we don't look at these before we knock these out. But I love this. I'm 11-2 also in the non-con with basically the same losses. I put at Kentucky as a loss, and I put Michigan State as the other one. I do think Kansas is a possibility there for this team. I think 3 losses in the non-con is the most that you can comfortably take if you're Carolina. If you lose 4, even if they're to all good teams, which it could be if you lose to Ohio State too, you just don't pick up any good wins out of that schedule. So I think they really need to be 3 or less. 11-2 would be great for them. For conference, I have them just 1 game worse, 12-6. I think they're probably going to drop one of those 3 road games to those teams in either Texas or California, which they shouldn't, but it's just a tough road trip for a team that's never made it
individually before. You shouldn't, right? Exactly. But when you put it together,
yeah, exactly. 23-8, so one game worse, but very, very similar kind of projection for where this team's going to be.
That would be an interesting thing to go back and look at, Andy, and we've got our ACC preview coming up later this week to see how if anybody swept the California swing last year in the first year of it. That'd be an interesting thing. All right, Andy, floor and ceiling feels like a very wide range of possibilities for this team because of all the newcomers. From a floor, the roster takes a while to gel. Luka Bogavac doesn't get cleared, but there is a better roster construction, the easier schedule we've talked about. So Carolina finishes like 5th in the ACC, makes the NCAA tournament as like a 7, 8, 9. They lose in the first round. For a ceiling, though, everything fits well. The team is bigger. It's more balanced because you're not relying on RJ Davis. There's a lot of more distributed, balanced scoring. Shooting and spacing allows Seth Trimble to thrive. Bogavac adjusts quickly. Caleb Wilson is a star, forms a dynamic front court with Henri Veesaar. The easier non-con, they figure out who they are. They dominate the ACC. And I mean, there is a world in which, if we're talking ceiling, they could beat Duke and Louisville, get first in the ACC, maybe a 2 seed, and make like the Elite 8, Andy. So again, I think a pretty broad range from floor to ceiling here.
Yeah, 100%. I think that the floor is scary for this team, and obviously part of it is because it includes not having Luka Bogavac, which would be quite frightening for them. But I agree. I think that those are kind of the ranges of outcomes here, and for me, I'm kind of, as you would expect, landing in the middle of that. I have this team as like a 6 seed, 5-6 seed, somewhere in there. I think that you finish 3rd or 4th in the ACC, ideally 3rd in the ACC. You don't lose any ugly games in the non-conference. That should get you in that 5-6 seed conversation, and then from there, you'll have a round of 32 game against either a 3 seed or a 4 seed. And I think that game's a complete coin flip, obviously matchup dependent, but I'll predict that they don't quite make it to the Sweet 16, which is probably this is the most interesting result to me in terms of Hubert Davis's job security. Is if this team is pretty good all year long, they roll their way into a 5 seed and they win a first round game and then they lose in the second round. Like, is that fireable? I don't think so, but is it below expectation? Probably. And I'm curious what would kind of happen. Like, if this team just tanks and does really poorly, Hubert's gone. If they get a 1 seed, even if they struggle in the tournament, he's sticking around. But like the 6 seed second round loss feels like kind of that weird range of like, I don't exactly know what's going to happen after the season.
I think we call that purgatory, Andy.
Yes, exactly.
As my my record was slightly better than yours, so too my NCAA tournament projection. I'm going to project like a 3-4 seed, lose in the Sweet 16 in that second weekend, but making the that second weekend, which again, I think, as you said, that's probably still feeling like underachieving for what North Carolina expects to be year in and year out. And so just, it really is going to be a very interesting year ultimately in Chapel Hill, Mr. Patton. Hey, I hope you enjoyed listening to that. Just always fun to hear like another perspective, even though it's a lot of me as well. You get to hear me kind of and see me in a different context, as well as Andy. And again, if you want to check out all of Locked On College Basketball, it's a great place to be. We hang out and have fun. There's a Discord for that one as well, just like Locked On Tar Heels. Speaking of which, if you haven't joined the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, man, that community is phenomenal. We'd love to have you in there talking Tar Heels all the time. If you want to go next level with the show, join the Locked On Tar Heels Insider Program. That link is in there as well. If you've not subscribed to Locked On Tar Heels on video and audio, now's the time to do it, man. Everything's heating up and you're going to miss out if you don't join it. You guys, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Don't forget to check out our regular Monday show. It's unpacking a lot of football stuff, odds and ends, all of that, our weekend whip around as well. We'll be back tomorrow and the rest of the week with great stuff as well. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again tomorrow, but until then, peace.